Good morning. My name is Cindy Barton, and I'm the program manager of the Center for Creativity. And I'm so happy that you have joined us today for I Can't Build a Pollinator Palace. And so we have today our friends from the Tulsa Garden Center, and they are part of Woodward Park. I may not be saying that right, but Andy can fill me in how it's officially said. But this is Andy, and he is the director?
I'm wearing many hats currently.
He's wearing many hats
Always.
for the Tulsa Garden Center. And then we also have Kate Wilson from Tulsa Garden Center. So Andy, Kate, and Brianna. Brianna's waving her hand. And so if you need anything, or they can, and then we also have this young lady helping out as well. What's your name, dear?
That's Rio.
So, Rio.
I'm so sorry. Why did
Rio.
I totally do that?
Rio's our youth ambassador volunteer.
Rio, yeah.
One more.
So, how many of you, is this your first time at a workshop today? Awesome. We are so happy you are here. We've been doing this for 10 years. And this is our 10th anniversary. We used to have them on Mondays at noon. And after the pandemic, guess what? Nobody wanted to leave their office at noon to come do something creative. So we moved them to Saturdays, and it has just grown exponentially. And we have you to thank for that. We have our partners, our nonprofit partners who come here, and they teach. We give them a very minimal amount of money for this, okay? They're doing this because they care about our community, right? So I get chills. We're building community. I love it. But anyway, so we're so happy to have you here. I want to tell everyone who comes through our doors at TCC about Tulsa Achieves. So Tulsa Achieves is a scholarship where a student who lives in Tulsa County can come to TCC and get 2 years of college for free if they come directly out of high school. And it's not like this crazy hard, you got to have straight A's. No, it's not that. You have to have a C average. You have to do 40 hours of service learning, public service. It's awesome. My daughter's in her second semester. I've not paid one penny, not because I work here, but because she's going to Tulsa Achieves. So keep that in mind if you have any kids in your life. And I'm going to turn it over to Andy, Kate, Brianna, and Rio. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Cindy. That was a great introduction. I appreciate it. So, like she said, I'm Andy Fusco. I am the acting executive director and director of horticulture at Tulsa Garden Center at Woodward Park. If you're not familiar with what we do, we've been there since 1954, and we do all of the events and educational programming in Woodward Park. And so most of what we do is this kind of stuff just in Woodward Park. But about a year ago, we started getting involved in these I Can't workshops, and it's a lovely way for us to kind of get outside of the park and reach some new people. I see some familiar faces and some unfamiliar faces, so it's great to meet everybody this morning. But as you can see, we have to kind of bring the garden and the park to the Center for Creativity, and we always make a mess, and they love that. So if they love it, we love it. So we're going to have some fun today. Before we get too deep, I want to make sure that everybody has some supplies. I know there was a changeover. So every table should have a pile of garden debris, our most beneficial thing that we're going to talk about. But every individual needs at least one or two of these plantain leaves and some twine. Will you raise your hand if you don't have that? Okay, so we need some at the back table and maybe a little bit here. And Rio, there's some scissors over here if you need them. So while we're getting everybody set up, how many people are excited for it to get above freezing today? I think we're almost, 33. We've made it, y'all. We've made it. It was a really funny sight. So the park had been closed because the roads were icy and snowy, and it was a really funny sight. Me and my garden team, they're not with us today, we were out in the garden harvesting this stuff for the class. We were going to maybe do it a little ahead of time, but then we were like, it'll melt by then. And it looked like we were doing some really important garden tasks in the middle of 30-degree weather, so that was pretty funny. But, it felt good to get out in the sunshine and garden. I know I'm ready for spring and ready to just dive back in. I've been huddled up in my house. I'm like the plants. I am not a winter person. And on that note, what we're doing today is making what we call pollinator palaces. So for a long time in our gardens, it was thought that those flowers in my garden are for me and for me to enjoy and to show off to my neighbors, and I want everything to be as pristine as possible. So if there's bugs nibbling on my plants, then I'm going to find a chemical to spray on my plants, and that will kill the bugs, and that's all well and good. Well, about 60, 70 years ago, we started kind of making the connection that our gardens are part of the larger ecosystems, right? And because of that, what we do in our yards affects the broader nature ecosystem. And so as we've gone on in modern day, we've recognized that we can do things in our own little tiny pockets of our urban oasis to help build these pollinator populations. And one of the most important things we can do is help them survive the winter. A lot of bugs burrow under leaf litter, and what they really like are things like you have on your table, things with hollow stems, grasses, all of these dead and dying plant material. And so the number one thing you can do is in your gardens, leave it as it was when the first frost came in until temperatures warm up to about 50 degrees. Things are going to burrow in there, and you might see as we're working today, little things start crawling out, which is exactly what we want to see.
You have to pay extra for that.
Yeah, don't eat them. They are high in protein, but we can also further, we can't always leave our gardens the way they are perfectly, and sometimes we're cleaning up throughout the season, and there's things we can do to help further encourage those populations. So we're going to make one version of what I call a pollinator palace today. And I'm going to show you some examples later of some different ways you can build these, but I thought this was a really fun way because it uses all biodegradable material. So if you left it in your garden and you never did anything else with it, eventually it's going to break down. And so you can use dried leaves out of your garden, but this time of year we don't have a lot of those. And so what I did is I went to the market and bought these. They're plantain leaves, so traditionally used in certain types of tamales in that sort of South American cuisine, but they're perfect for this. And it's like, if anybody ever made spring rolls or a burrito, it's pretty much what we're doing. So we've got our base, our wrap, and when I bought them, they were refrigerated, and I let them come up to room temperature because they're much more pliable. And then I'm just going to take a mixture of what we have on our tables. Make sure our folks at home can see. And really just build up the volume. And a variety of things is great because different critters want different things. So a lot of our solitary bees, our North American native bees that don't live in big hives and colonies, they like thicker stems to burrow into and lay eggs. Some of your smaller caterpillars that will eventually turn into moths will actually overwinter in that pupa stage. And so this isn't just an overwintering habitat. This can also be, as this stuff breaks down in the spring and summer, there's a lot of microbial activity that's happening microscopically that on the lower ends of the food chain, things are feeding on that. And so that's probably pretty good. And then I've got my twine. And I'm just going to roll it up. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You can make it as artistic or as rustic as you'd like. And then I'm going to tie. There's many ways to do this, but the way that works easiest for me is I first tie one loop around. And then that gives me an anchor so that then I can wrap. So, this one is kind of fast and loose. It's not the prettiest one I've done. But you can see the concept. There's a lot of different material. There's a somewhat weatherproofing material on the outside. And so they're going to stay warmer and drier than they would if they were just exposed to the elements. And ultimately, you're giving a place for them to burrow and nest. Did we have a question in the back?
I just wanted to explain that the leaves that you put on your tables, you can make another one with this, but they have started to dry. So what we planned to use them for was the inside of your pollinator palace. It just does create a little bit more tunnels and space for them to make their homes in.
Yeah, so what Kate was explaining is these were some leaves that we had dried out of the garden. So you can do something similar on a smaller scale. And I have one, I had soaked them overnight, but to keep them from just being completely sopping wet when we came in here today, I pulled them out a little early, so some of them may be dry. But this is to show you that you can harvest leaves at the end of your season before things completely freeze and dry them to do this as well. But I was also playing with this, that it can be a way to make a little bit more of an artistic outer covering. So again, I put some leaves down first. And I'll show you, everything you've got on your table is really the perfect diameter, but in some of these other examples I'm going to show you here in a bit, you can use things even as big around as that. And that's not quite hollow, but it's a soft wood that certain bees are going to like to burrow into. That. So it doesn't have to be sticks. It can be larger things, and it can also be leaf litter. So a wide variety of types of insects and critters are going to prefer different things. The native bees also like mud and clay, and so you can you could even get real creative with this and put the outside, use some clay, and really seal it up, and they're going to like that as well. Make another burrito. So you can see that gives it some different texture and look, just a little more funky looking. And I need some more twine. So you could get real creative with this and use different colored kite string and that sort of thing to really give a funky look. The only thing is some of those are synthetic, and so they're not going to break down as much, so you would need to remove those when the rest of the palace breaks down. This is falling apart on me. So now we've made them, we've put them in our garden, So what are we actually promoting? Well, I had my resident entomologist put together a little cheat sheet for me. Butterflies like monarchs that we know, in the winter they migrate south, but a majority of our native butterflies will actually overwinter as the chrysalis stage or the pupa stage, and so they need areas to crawl into and overwinter. But the native solitary bees, like I said, they're going to use these all year round, and they're going to lay eggs and burrow into the wood, and they actually build nests within these. And they're not super harmful, so that you're not promoting, stingers or anything like that. But even some of our more earth-dwelling critters, like the ground beetles and the rove beetles, they like soil and leaf litter. And I think more and more we're realizing that we don't see as many fireflies anymore. And those also use leaf litter in the stuff that piles up on the tops of our soil over the winter to kind of crawl around and do the majority of their life stage in the leaf litter. What we see when we're running around as kids and putting them in jars, it's a very small piece of their lifespan. And so we want to keep this litter in our yards to further promote that.
How many of you guys have a leaf litter pile at your home?
Yeah, so
Maybe it's because we're lazy, or maybe
Right.
we're composting. Right?
yeah, so this is just more of a fun artistic way to do this. When I was practicing for these, I made, a few of them, and then I tied them together, and you can stack them and make kind of a more of an artistic look. And I would probably put these in a little corner of my garden, somewhere that's kind of fun, and maybe somebody's going to ask me about it, and I'm going to be able to further educate people about the necessary benefits of pollinators. But then, through the summer, this will probably dry out. There's probably not going to be much activity, and then what do I do with this? I could just throw it in my compost pile. But yeah, I mean, it's a great, if you have a chimenea or a fire pit in your backyard, it's a perfect fire starter as well. And once temperatures are, in the 50s and 60s, you're probably not going to have much activity going on in there, so I wouldn't worry too much about, burning anything alive. But yes.
I have grapevine and it's crazy, and I was thinking about cutting it back. It's better to wait so that something might use the hollowed out grapevine.
For grapevine, yes. So the question was, she has grapevine probably along a fence line that's probably gotten way out of control, and she was wanting to go ahead and cut that back now, probably when you can see its structure. And is it better to wait? Typically, yes, but what I would argue with the grapevine is that's a perennial vine, and so those stems are actually alive. And what our insects and species like is dead plant material, so you're probably safe to go ahead and cut that back now, because the thing about grapevine is it'll take off as soon as it warms up, and you're better off getting a hold of that now rather. Yes?
Black widows, where do black widows go?
So black widows tend to overwinter in dark, damp. You might, but you're more likely to find a black widow in your garage where it stays dark all the time, or underneath a plant saucer. While we're talking about, plant saucers, this is just one version. Oh, I was going to say one more thing about what you can do with these. The other thing that's fun about, increasing our pollinator populations is great for human health. 90% of the food we eat is pollinated. It needs a flying insect to pollinate it, and so everything we can do has further impacts up the food chain, including birds. So it's not just, we want the pollinators to live in here, grow up, and become adults. This will also feed your birds. And so towards the end of the winter, when, on a weekend or a week like this, you could probably hang this up and it's going to catch that warm weather. Things are going to start moving around in there, and the birds instinctually know to come, and they will start poking around and eating the little grubs and other bugs that are in here. So if you're a bird watcher, these things are also bird magnets. I did want to show you some examples of some other cool things that you can do. Kids can get really involved. This is a fun one with fake bugs, but it's just paper towel rolls. I put this together in about 10 minutes. I had a paper towel roll. Ideally, you want something a little larger, a little more volume, so a poster tube or something like that. But then you can I just had lots of sticks and old bamboo stakes that didn't work in the garden anymore. But this is another example of what you can do. You can get real big and intricate. So this is a palette. And different bricks. Stones and rocks are also places, especially, you may not know that even in Tulsa proper, we get lizards and that sort of thing if we have the right habitats for them. And so this would be a mecca for all kinds of different various critters. And, depending on your garden aesthetic, that's pretty appealing. If you're a little more, this is probably the fanciest one, and these you can buy as, pre-made kits online. And that's more of a carpenter bee habitat, so it's a lot of, you could use paper straws or dreaded paper straws that fall apart. You could put those in there. And then these are just logs that you've just drilled different size holes in. But there's, I don't know what the red is. I think that's probably wood slats and sawdust, because there's certain types of predatory wasps, predatory to your bad bugs, not to you, that like to nest in that sort of material. And then this is Kate's that she has in her backyard, and it's real simple. It's just some extra cinder blocks. I mean, we all probably have weird cinder blocks sitting around our house that we inherited when we bought our house. And you can just stack them in artistic ways and put various things around them. They're almost like little bug shrines.
And I like to play with little marbles on top and do stuff. I will, if you have dogs, it can also become a urine palace. You don't want to live on the first floor of my bug hotel. Second floor is okay, the first floor is not.
So what Kate is saying is it attracts animals of all sizes for various reasons, but so really the opportunities are endless, even for these. But what I like about the ones we're doing today are that it's completely biodegradable. These banana leaves are really a fun way to kind of make your own thing, and then you could hang it up in the tree, or you could even make a bunch of these and then put them in the holes of the cinder blocks. So how are we doing? Is everybody? We have a little more material if anybody wants to make another one. Any questions? Any further questions? We've got a little bit of time. Yes?
Are your workshops free?
No, not always. We try to have a varying range of cost points for our workshops, so depending on how hands-on they are, or if it's a lecture or whatnot, and all that information can be found on our website. But we always have a lot of really great stuff happening at Woodward Park, and everybody should have gotten one of those flyers. We've got a lot of fun stuff coming up this spring for all the garden lovers. And most of our workshops, too, are a mix of people that are lifelong gardeners or newbies, and everybody always gets something out of it as well. Here's some more things that Kate brought from her. So this is just we buy these little pots and we think, oh, that'd be cute to have a little plant in there, and then it needs watered 4 times a day, and so you quit using them. Well, these are great for this types of things, and it's just just pretty rustic, sticks, rocks. We're really just trying to mimic that natural process that happens in the wild. For so much of human history, we were trying to fight nature. And I think really the trend of modern horticulture is that we're trying to look at what nature does and showing how that can help us, and we can lean into that. Let's see.
Got a question.
Yes.
I was just wondering, if we can't find banana leaves when you need them or something, do you have any other thoughts on taking this all
Yeah, that's a great question. So she's asking about other options if we can't find banana leaves. And that also makes me remember that, this is a great time of year to do this because we're thinking about it's cold and things need overwintering. But actually the perfect time of year to do this is probably in the fall. And so if you have things like canna lilies or other things in your garden already that you want to cut down and use that are they're going to become mush when it freezes anyways. And so that's not a great habitat other than just the leaf litter that's going to pile up on the ground. You could use burlap. Some burlap's going to last longer than a few seasons, but burlap would be another great biodegradable cardboard box. I didn't finish building this one, but probably not great that it's got a bunch of probably sealer on it, but you can get the point that if you had a cardboard box, you could really stack a bunch of stuff in this and build it up, almost like that example. Wood pallets, any sort of structure that's going to have volume, and it's going to give these little critters kind of a protective outer coating that you're going to be able to fill with some smaller stuff is going to be great. Does that help? Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you for asking. So one of our best places in Woodward Park, where's my map? Can I have a handout? Thank you. There you go. And this is probably our most forward-facing program that the Garden Center does. So this is the mansion that is the Garden Center. And right over here is the teaching garden at Woodward Park. How many of you have been there? Great. So most of you know about it. It's kind of a little hidden gem. It'll turn 20 years old next year, which is kind of amazing. And it's just about a 2-acre space that's little pocket gardens of, we have a xeric garden that shows you what plants to plant for dry, drought-tolerant gardening. We have a butterfly garden. Everything planted in there has some sort of pollinator benefit. And then we have other various spaces like a vegetable garden and herb garden. And the whole space is meant to serve the public and create community like we are here today. And we don't, try to plant in anything in there that we wouldn't expect you all as an average home gardener to plant. So if you see it there, you can do it as well. And it's also a classroom space. So a lot of our workshops and programs are taught out of there. I think our next upcoming one is our pruning workshop. That's always a really fun one because we get out in the garden and we actually prune and take turns cutting stuff. But the other thing that's really popular about that we don't see at a lot of other workshops is we have a whole, almost an hour of tool maintenance. So if you're, tired of buying new shears every couple of years because they just don't make them like they used to, that's a great one because our teaching garden manager, Lee Taylor, is fabulous at showing you all of the easy, cost-effective ways to keep your tools in really good shape. And it's actually more fun than I thought it would be. I'm not, mechanically minded. We also have Springfest coming up. That's always our biggest plant festival every year, April 11th and 12th. 40-plus plant vendors. And so get a jump start on your gardening right here in Woodward Park. So. We have an arboretum, so you can come. It's usually on the back, but it's this bottom corner. It's a collection of trees that have been there since 1964 and some that just got planted. So you can kind of see what, we normally think of a hackberry as kind of a junk weed tree that grows up along our fence lines. Well, if you give it enough space, what does it look like? You can come out and see hackberry. We also have 4 state champions in the arboretum, which means that they're the biggest trees of those species in the entire state. So we have a Don redwood, an English oak, an American holly, and a Japanese pagoda tree that are all the biggest you'll see anywhere in the state of Oklahoma. So right here in our backyard.
And those little pieces I put on your table for the embellishments, like cool little things, those are all from the arboretum. So I foraged them earlier this fall.
Thank you, Kate. Did anybody find any bugs? What did we find? Tiny mite. Spiders. Yeah, I was hoping, well, they're probably all in my car. A lot of this stuff set in my car overnight and warmed up in the sun. But I was hoping we'd get some good examples of, most bugs in the garden are nothing to be worried about. And actually, they're beneficial. And even if they're eating your plants, nowadays we say that if your leaves don't have bite marks on them, then they're not contributing to the local ecosystem. And so, a little bit can always help. Nope. Yes.
Are there any hidden gems that the general public might not know about, but you guys think are super special spots?
Yeah. What comes to your mind, Brianna? I saw your eyes light up.
I love the Shakespeare Monument.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's beautiful.
So, one of the amazing things about Woodward Park is that everybody has a Woodward Park story. If you've been in Tulsa even 6 months, you probably have a Woodward Park story. And there are tons of little hidden gems. Like, did anybody know we have a Shakespeare monument? So some of my folks here that have been with us for a while do. But it's a little monument that was donated by the Shakespeare Club in the 80s, even further than that.
It was made in the 30s.
30s.
Designed by Ada Robinson.
Oh yeah, Ada Robinson designed it, who did Boston Avenue, along with Bruce Goff. So there's tons of history in Woodward Park. It's Tulsa's second oldest park. Does anybody know what Tulsa's oldest park is? Owen Park, yes, by 7 days or something like that. Yeah. And the area that Tulsa Garden Center is kind of in and we manage used to be an estate until the 50s when the city bought it and turned it into the garden center. That estate became part of Woodward Park. And so there's so much history in Woodward Park, and we kind of see ourselves as where Tulsa is probably our oldest public-private partnership, which is pretty common nowadays. There's lots of those around town. If you think of the zoo and Gilcrease Museum and lots of other things, we're the oldest one, 1954, and we were started as a place for all the plant societies to meet. So if you're interested in something like herbs, roses, daylilies, we have societies for that, and they may seem kind of old school and old fashioned, but they're really places, like Cindy was saying at the beginning, that we create community and you meet your people. And they're always doing fun stuff, and we're always working together with them. Actually, coming up, we'll be at the Home and Garden Show. Tulsa Garden Club works really closely with the Home Builders Association, and so they will have a booth, and they've invited Tulsa Garden Center and the rest of the plant societies to come share their booth with them. So there's always fun gardening stuff going on at the park, and we see ourselves as kind of the horticulture hub of Tulsa. And we work alongside our neighbors at Philbrook and our friends at Tulsa Botanic Garden, but we kind of see ourselves as the ones primarily focused on horticulture education. So that's why we love doing stuff like this today. Yes.
What's happening with the Rose Garden?
Rose Garden, yeah. So that's kind of a hidden gem. The Rose Garden is a Civil Works Administration project in the 30s, and then it was known for the longest time of being a beautiful place that just had tons of rose bushes in it. And almost everybody probably has pictures of that back in the day. Well, in the early 2010s, there was a new disease that became prominent in mostly the southern U.S., but there's other places in the Midwest that have it as well, and it's called rose rosette disease. It's a virus that is vectored by a microscopic mite, which means that the mite carries it, it floats on the wind, it nibbles on your rose bush, and then your rose bush gets it. The thing about viruses and plants is once a plant has a virus, it pretty much has it for the rest of its life. And so the only way to combat that is to remove symptomatic rose bushes. And the mites live in the soil, and it's just a pervasive thing. And so we saw considerable decline over that 10-year period. The fun fact is that you probably wouldn't notice, but we have 350 plus rose bushes in the rose garden. They're just more pocketed throughout the garden, because one of the things we can do is, we keep them separated with other plants where the mites don't like to live. Because what that was a monoculture, which is another thing we used to do, is we used to like one big crop of one thing. And then when a disease hits, it wipes it out. And here we are, almost 10, 15 years later. And we still on the weekly get that question, what happened to the roses? So it would probably never look like it used to look. But we're always kind of forward thinking and looking at what it can be for, next generations. And it was actually originally supposed to be kind of a mini botanic garden for Tulsa. But at the time, municipal rose gardens were all the rage, and they were the trend, and so that's what it turned into. And so kind of getting it back to that, but it will probably always be the Tulsa Rose Garden in name. Yes?
So we were at the Rose Garden, and I noticed that it was mostly in the center small rose bushes. Will those stay those size, or will they get bigger?
That's a great question. It gives me a kind of talking point too, is you're probably talking about tier 4. We have a whole tier that is all what we call trial roses. So we partner with an organization called the American Garden Rose Selections. It's a national organization, and they send us those roses every 2 years. And they're new varieties that they're breeding, and they're trying to get resistance. And then we trial them in the garden, and me and some city staff go out 3 times a year and evaluate them. So the reason they seem to never get very big is because every 2 years they're being removed. They're destroyed. So unless they become a winner, so they're scientific study plants, and so they are property of certain breeders and whatnot, and so they have to be destroyed when they're removed. But then when they announce a winner, they're getting ready to announce the 2024 or 25 winners, and we're going to get a whole slate of those roses to put throughout the rest of the garden. So those are really cool new varieties, and it's great to it's always one of those things that gets low on the priority list, and then when I do it, it's like you get out and you smell it, and you get to rate it and see how it's doing, and it's really fun. And that's kind of like what the teaching garden is too. We don't do any formal trials in the teaching garden, but come out this year, there's a path along one of the roads that we call our trial beds, and every year Southwood Landscape and Garden Center donates a slate of plants. So last year we had begonias, and everybody thinks I know what a begonia looks like, right? Well, they donated 16 types of begonias, and when we planted them side by side, you got to really step back and say like, oh, that one's cool, and that one has a big leaf, and that one, you could see the differences. So this year, I can't announce what we're doing yet, but we're going to have another type of plant that you may say, oh, I've planted that before. But you can come out and kind of see the wide varieties that they have available and kind of pick and choose for your garden for next year. So that's the most fun part about what we do, is getting to share that kind of stuff with you all. Our natural world is so important for us to connect to, even more so nowadays. And getting to do that along with building community like we are here today is just kind of the perfect, thing to do. So, and we're right down the street. So it's 10 minutes away from basically everywhere in Tulsa. So no excuses not to come out and see us. So.
I proposed there, and my wife said yes. Any of you?
Yeah. I told you, Woodward Park stories. Everybody's got one. Yes.
You mentioned that some roses get viruses, and then there are scientific studies. What other commonalities or just like similarities that you have found or noticed between like garden culture and then like human nature, humankind, or our culture?
Wow, that's a big question. You mean just in terms of like plant health and human health?
Sure.
Well, I feel like they're kind of the same. In terms of like low down on the microscopic level, plants are really funny in terms of like, we have a certain number of, animals have a certain number of genes and chromosomes and all that, and plant chromosomes are entirely, different. And like a sunflower may have a certain set, and an aster, and they're in the same plant family, may have a totally different set. So they're not always comparable. But I think that then zooming way out, so that was zooming in, zooming way out, our public green spaces are inherently valuable to our communities. And I think that's, so that's Woodward Park, that's the Botanic Garden, that's Philbrook. So no matter what scale you're talking about, and I think we all agree with that, right? But I think on the macro level, they're not always valued, and it became very obvious during COVID when our places to gather were outside, right? And so I think keeping in mind, not taking it for granted that Tulsa has places, so much green space, and an area that you have the gathering place, Woodward Park and Philbrook, all in one kind of chunk that you can spend a whole day at. Not all communities have that, and don't take for granted that Tulsa's health and its vibrancy is directly related to that. We have all of these amazing things in Tulsa, but I'm always a preacher of that it's the outdoor spaces that really cultivate that community. Because you can do everything from get engaged at Woodward Park, and you can have a fancy, fancy wedding right there in the Garden Center mansion, but you can just also have your first date picnic right in the shade of the Arboretum. And so there's all those life events. I got into this because I loved plants, and I loved gardening, and I wanted to turn that into my career. But I fell in love with this because of the stories that these places create. And so this isn't just like a fun hobby kind of thing. Like, to me, this is human life and human experience and all of that.